Hi friends, my name is Claire and this is the story of a serial hugger, so please stick around. Hi friends, my name is Claire and this is my channel, Woodshed Theory. Here, I make content about what it is like to live as an adult on the autism spectrum and whatever else feels good to me. So if that sounds good to you, or if you're feeling particularly gracious today, and I hope that you are, please go ahead and click the subscribe button, ring the bell. I almost forgot to mention that I put out videos 3 times a week. Click the like, click the like. Autism and inappropriate social behavior. If you are on the spectrum, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The idea for this topic came to me from a friend who recently reached out to let me know how much she appreciated my friendship even before my diagnosis. And she also mentioned that the second time I had met her, I had hugged her. And she really appreciated that as well. But it did remind me of the idea of socially inappropriate behavior when you're on the spectrum. And I'm here today to tell you that I'm a serial hugger. I was a serial hugger growing up, especially pre-diagnosis. I thought this was an interesting topic because I know a lot of you are going to watch this and say, as an autistic person, I don't want to touch or hug anyone. I don't want anyone to touch me. I don't even want to shake hands. That's totally not me. And that is a legitimate way that autism presents itself, but there are other ways that autism presents itself. And for me, it was my need to hug everybody that I came into contact with growing up. So yes, I know a lot of people on the spectrum are going to watch this and say, this is not me, but I'm hoping that there are some of you who watch this and say that it was you or that you relate to it, because autism and socially inappropriate behavior go hand in hand, because autism is a social disorder at its heart. This is an embarrassing topic for me to talk about, because when I think about it and how I behaved pre-diagnosis, growing up, how my ASD presented itself, it is embarrassing. So if I sound funny or if I'm not making sense during this video, that's fine. And I'm proud of who I am as a person and how far I've come, but I thought we should talk about this. First, I thought we could go through a few examples of how intense this was in my life. I believe that I learned to hug everyone I saw. Basically, I can remember as far back as going to church when I was little and attending religious services and activities. I would hug everyone I saw. I don't know that I was never forced to hug anybody, but I saw other people hugging each other when they greeted each other, and in my mind something clicked that if you see somebody that you know or you're meeting someone, all of those interactions either start and or end in a hug. And that was part of my church experience. We'd go in a little bit early, I'd hunt down all the people that I knew, and I would hug them. That moved on into other areas of my life as I got older, hugging friends at school or even hugging teachers. I remember in elementary school, I was on a field trip and I went up to hang out with the adults on the bus because I'm autistic, I'm not hanging out with other kids. And I went up and my teacher was talking and I gave him a hug and I gave him a kiss on the cheek, and everyone, the other adult chaperones were like, "Aw," and the teacher was like, "Aw." And now I look back at that and I'm terrified because in my mind, I knew him and he meant something to me as my teacher, even if I was in elementary school, not romantically, but that to me seemed like the right thing to do. But I'm sure if you asked any of my fellow students in the 4th and 5th grade, they were probably gonna tell you that that was weird. So there was that. I also worked at a Christian summer camp every summer growing up. I attended as a little child and I worked there through my teenage years. I would always hug everybody that I saw and came in contact with there. Something I was thinking about was one summer I decided that I was going to hug everyone I saw, obviously, because that's just what you did. That's how you greeted or said goodbye to people. But then I felt that I had observed other people in other cultures and other groups. They would greet each other with like a kiss on the cheek. So I wouldn't do that with the boys, because obviously we weren't supposed to have any kind of physical contact with the boys at this camp. But if I saw any of my girlfriends, I would hug them and then greet them with a kiss on the cheek or both cheeks, not realizing that, well, I realized that other people weren't doing this in that situation. But for me, I thought that that was totally fine. And I was showing my friends that were girls how much I cared about them and loved them. And what was interesting to me is that later, I remember distinctly, either that day, was it the first day of camp or working at camp, later that day or a few days later, having someone pull me aside and tell me that the girls weren't comfortable with me doing that. I don't know if it was a guy who told me, but I was told that that was weird, basically. I don't know if that's the word that was used. I was bummed out about this and a little shocked because I was just trying to show them my love and my care for them, but it wasn't a socially acceptable practice in that specific setting. And looking back, I can totally see how it was weird and that was weird behavior. But I wasn't trying to be romantic or hit on girls or anything like that. I just thought that that was a good way to greet them. And it was not in that setting. So there's just another example of how me showing physical affection to people was wrong in the social situation. But wait, there's more. Then I was thinking about my first ever real job when I was 15. I got a job at the local pharmacy as a pharmacy technician. At the time, they'd hire a high schooler to do that. And my job was basically counting pills, working the register, and working under the pharmacist. He would check everything, work on those issues. Well, my first day ever working there, I was about to leave for the day, and I absolutely hugged my boss goodbye. And I thought that this was a completely normal thing to do because up until that point in my life, I would hug everyone that I met, hello or goodbye. And it wasn't until he responded in kind of a, basically, it wasn't like creepy on his end or anything, but he was kind of like, oh, that's so sweet that you'd hug me. And it then clicked to me that it was not normal to hug your boss and that that was a socially weird and awkward thing to do. And that was a learning lesson for me as well. So why did I behave this way and why am I looking back on it today? As I mentioned before, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, is a social disorder. Autistic people are always going to struggle to read social situations and act accordingly. As a child, I was modeled to hug the people around me. So what happened over time is I unknowingly developed a script that involved the hug. In autism, scripts don't necessarily just mean what you're saying. It can also mean how you act and how you behave in a certain situation. And for me, hugging and sometimes kissing someone on the cheek hello had become a script for me. It was what I did when I said hello and said goodbye. I would use that same script in any situation that I ran into because that is what I knew was correct. So instead of adapting to each new situation and changing my behavior, for example, going into a new job, you're not going to hug your boss. Going into every new situation, I wasn't changing the script. I wasn't changing my normal set of behaviors that I had subconsciously written for myself to be social. In my mind, the proper social thing to do when you saw somebody would be to hug them. If you've been here for a while, you know that autistic people, we struggle with change, we struggle to adapt to social situations, we struggle to adapt our scripts and behaviors in new situations. So I was always just working in the realm of what I knew to be acceptable, and I didn't know that there were instances, many instances, where my behavior wasn't appropriate. It wasn't necessarily inappropriate, but it also wasn't the socially acceptable, socially appropriate thing to do. In the instances where people pointed this out to me, was I embarrassed pre-diagnosis? I would say yes, I was embarrassed pre-diagnosis if somebody said something about my actions towards other people. If they said, hey, that's kind of awkward, or hey, that's not appropriate, I would be bummed out about it because I thought that I was doing things correctly. I was following my social script that made sense to me, that I thought made sense to other people, and getting told that something that you thought was a good thing is actually a bad thing, that's difficult to hear. I was just trying my best to fit in and striking out at every turn. So looking back, yeah, I was a little bit embarrassed. And it wasn't really until today when I got the text message from my friend mentioning the hugging thing that I had ever thought of it as a symptom of my autism. But it 100% is. The things that we do that are socially abnormal, that we do as behaviors to attempt to mask in social situations and be accepted by the group, those are all part of our autism. And that's why I wanted to talk about this subject today, because you may have areas in your life where you think back to, this was just part of my script in word and in actions, and I wasn't trying to ... offend somebody, make somebody feel awkward, etc. So how do I feel about it now, and how do I handle it moving forward? Yes, it's a little embarrassing to look back at, especially as a person who wasn't diagnosed and didn't know that there was a reason that I was acting the way I was acting, and there was things I could do to change people's reactions and do a better job socially, but I didn't know that. In a lot of ways, I look back at my small self growing up, and I feel sad for that girl, especially because I also know that a lot of you feel that way, where you look back at yourself growing up and you feel sad for yourself, your past self. And I think that's pretty normal, not knowing what you were doing wrong. And then later in life, learning that the reason that things were awkward, the reason that things weren't going well, is because you are autistic, and there are things that you can do to do better in a neurotypical world. Not necessarily changing everything about you or not wanting to be neurodiverse, but there are things you can do to be more accepted in a neurotypical world. The good thing is that autistic people can learn to do better in neurotypical social situations. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not trying to say that you should try to pretend to be neurotypical. I don't think that helps at all. Masking is very dangerous. But autistic children and adults can learn to do better in neurotypical situations. The issue is early intervention, I found in most cases. the earlier that you can get to a child and let them know, hey, it's not normal to hug your boss or greet people in this situation with a kiss or anything like that. Those are things that we just don't pick up on as autistic people. And those are things that we can absolutely learn. When is it appropriate to hug somebody? When's a handshake appropriate? When's a kiss appropriate? Etc. We can't change unless we know that there's an issue first. So a lot of my young life was devoted to not knowing that there was an issue, but working really hard because I knew something was off and something wasn't clicking, and why isn't it working? I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. I know it's a little bit out there. Is it out there? I want to talk about this because it's something that is very personal to me, and therefore there must be other people who are on the spectrum who've gone through something similar. Even if you don't like being touched, maybe there's something else that you've experienced where you thought it was socially okay, come to find out it's not, and now you're dealing with it. Please go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your experience. It really helps everyone in our community. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next time. Bye!